There's nothing you need to do right now. Nothing at all. Wherever you are, tucked under a blanket, your head resting on a pillow, the room settled into its nighttime quiet. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. You can let your shoulders drop a little. You can let your hands relax, your fingers uncurl, the weight of the day beginning to lift, very slowly, the way fog lifts off a still pond in the early morning without anyone asking it to. Let your breathing find its own pace. There is no rush here. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere quiet, a small street in a small town, on a day when the rain came early and stayed late, when the whole world smelled of wet stone and damp leaves and something warm baking somewhere just out of sight. A day when nobody was in a hurry because the weather had gently decided it for them. And on that street, tucked between a tailor's shop with a faded green awning and a small cafe whose windows were always a little fogged from the inside, there was a bookshop. It did not have a grand name above the door. Just a simple wooden sign, painted by hand in soft, dark letters, that read, Morrow and Company, Books. The letters had been touched up so many times over the years that they had a certain roundness to them now, a slight imperfection that made the sign feel like an old friend rather than a formal announcement. The door was dark wood with a small glass panel, and above it hung a brass bell that gave a soft, two-note chime whenever anyone pushed it open. Not a loud ring, the kind of sound that made you think of tea kettles and quiet afternoons. Inside, the shop smelled the way only old bookshops smell. Paper and time, a little dust, a faint trace of cedar wood from the shelves themselves, and something else underneath all of it that had no real name, but that settled over you the moment you stepped through the door, like a shawl placed gently over your shoulders. The floor was wooden, slightly uneven in places, and it creaked in particular spots that every regular customer had long since memorized. Near the shelf marked History, there was a soft groan underfoot about 3 steps in. By the window table, a single plank gave a low sound like a sleeping sigh. The customers who came most often had learned to step around these spots, not to avoid the noise, but simply because they were familiar. Like old acquaintances you nod to without needing to speak. The woman who kept the shop was named Edith. She was somewhere in her early 60s, though she had one of those faces that seemed to have decided on an age long ago and simply stayed there. Her hair was the color of winter ash, gathered loosely at the back of her neck in a way that was practical rather than precise, and she wore, almost every day without exception, a soft cardigan in shades of deep blue or faded green that had been washed so many times it had taken on the quality of something lived in and beloved. Edith had run the shop for nearly 30 years. She had inherited it from a man named Arthur Morrow, who had been the father of a school friend, and who had, with no particular ceremony, handed her the keys one October morning and said simply, "Take care of it, and it will take care of you." She had understood what he meant, in a way that would have been hard to explain to anyone who had not spent time in a place like this. And she had done exactly as he said. She knew the inventory not from a system or a catalog, but from memory. She knew that the poetry section needed 3 more steps of light after noon, so she would often carry the small reading lamp from her desk and set it on the shelf nearby. She knew that the children's section smelled faintly of lavender because years ago, a customer had left a sachet in a forgotten corner, and she had decided she liked it enough not to remove it. She knew that the biography section ran long and that new arrivals almost always had to be placed sideways on the shelf, their spines facing upward, which she did not mind because she found something endearing about the way books lay on their backs, like small resting creatures. On this particular rainy morning, Edith had arrived at the shop a little before 9, which was her custom. She had unlocked the door, stepped inside, and stood still for a moment, as she always did, just breathing in the quiet. Outside, the rain fell at a steady, unhurried pace, not the heavy kind that drums against windows and makes people run for shelter. This was a softer rain, more like a prolonged mist with a little more intention to it, the kind that settles on your coat in tiny, invisible drops and only makes itself known when you finally come inside. The kind of rain that makes the world look as though someone has placed a thin gauze over everything, softening the edges of buildings and the outlines of trees until the street outside looks almost like a painting of itself. Edith put the kettle on in the small back room behind the main shelves, where she kept a wooden chair, a table with a blue checked cloth, and a little window that looked out onto a narrow alley where a single potted fern lived on a ledge and seemed, against all reasonable expectation, to thrive. While the kettle heated, she moved slowly through the shop, doing what she always did in the first quiet minutes of the morning. She straightened a few volumes that had leaned in the night. She brushed a light layer of dust from the top shelf with a soft cloth. She opened the window above the poetry section just a crack, just enough to let in the cool, wet air and the sound of the rain, and then stood for a moment listening to it, the way you might pause to listen to music playing from somewhere down the street. By the time her tea was ready, she had settled into her chair behind the low front desk, which was more of a wide table than a proper counter, covered in a pleasantly organized scatter of bookmarks, small notes, a ceramic cup filled with pens and pencils, and a current reading, a collection of old letters from the 1800s that she had been working through slowly for the better part of a month, allowing herself only a few pages each day to make it last. She wrapped both hands around her mug and looked out at the shop. The morning light, filtered through the rain-blurred windows, gave the shelves a soft amber quality, as though the whole interior had been touched very lightly with a warm brush. The spines of the books glowed faintly, reds and dark blues and greens, old gold lettering, cracked and worn labels, newer covers with their brighter colors sitting a little more boldly beside the quieter, older ones. Edith had always loved the shop best in this early hour, before anyone arrived, when it belonged entirely to itself. A little before 10, the bell above the door gave its soft 2-note chime, and the first visitor of the day stepped inside. His name was Frederick, though he had for most of his adult life gone by the name Fred, and almost everyone in the neighborhood knew him. He was a retired school teacher, geography and natural history. A tall, unhurried man with large hands and a habit of speaking slowly and with long pauses that students had once found unnerving, and that most people now found simply peaceful. He was in his mid-70s, with a broad white mustache and the kind of comfortable, slightly rounded build that suggests a man who has made his peace with sitting still. Fred visited the shop on Tuesdays and Saturdays as a rule, but on rainy days he tended to appear outside these appointments, drawn by something he could not quite name and did not particularly try to. He would say, if asked, that he had only stopped in to look for something specific, but in truth, he rarely had anything specific in mind. The shop simply asked to be visited. He stood near the door for a moment, shaking a few raindrops from the collar of his coat, and gave Edith a small nod. She gave him one in return and said, "There is tea if you want it." He considered this in his unhurried way and said, "Perhaps in a bit, thank you," and then moved deeper into the shop. Fred had a particular path he tended to follow. He would begin near the natural history shelves along the left wall, trailing one finger lightly along the spines without pulling any book out, as though greeting them rather than searching among them. Then he would move along the back of the shop, past the maps and the travel writing, where he sometimes paused for longer, then diagonally toward the center table, which Edith kept stocked with a rotating selection of whatever she was currently reading or particularly recommending, though she never put a sign on it saying so. And then, eventually, he would arrive at the small armchair near the window. There was only one armchair, positioned to catch the light from the side window on good days, and the glow of the floor lamp on gray ones, where he would sit with whatever he had picked up along the way and read quietly for the better part of an hour. This was Fred's version of a morning walk, not through parks or along pavements, but through here. The rain continued to fall outside, a little heavier now, beating down the glass of the front window in thin, slow lines. A car passed in the street, its headlights casting a brief, moving light across the ceiling of the shop. And then it was quiet again. Edith turned a page of her old letters. Fred found something in the travel section, a slender volume about a series of journeys made along the coasts of Northern Europe in the 1950s. Small hardcover with a faded blue jacket, and carried it to the armchair, where he sat with the ease of someone taking a familiar seat. For a while, the only sounds in the shop were the rain, the occasional soft rustle of a turning page, and from somewhere deeper in the building, the distant sound of a pipe settling, which gave off a periodic, low, unobtrusive tap that had been part of the shop's ambient music for as long as either of them could remember. There is something about two people reading in the same room without the need to speak to each other that is one of the quieter pleasures available in this life. It requires a particular kind of comfort between people, a settled trust that silence is not an absence but a kind of company. Edith and Fred had arrived at this kind of comfort gradually and without discussion over the years of his Tuesday and Saturday visits, until now it sat between them as naturally as the furniture. Around 11, a younger woman came in out of the rain. Her name was Clara, and she was perhaps 35, with dark hair pinned up in a slightly unruly way that suggested she had put it up quickly before leaving the house and then forgotten about it. She was wearing a long coat in a deep rust color, slightly damp at the shoulders and she was carrying a canvas bag that appeared to be quite full of things already. Clara was a bookbinder by trade. She had a small studio a few streets away where she repaired old and damaged books, and occasionally took commissions for bespoke handmade notebooks and journals. She came to Morrow and Company somewhat irregularly, though more often than not she appeared when she had a project requiring research, or when she simply needed an hour away from her studio, where she could sit with a cup of tea and let her thoughts slow down. She smiled at Edith when she came in, and Edith smiled back, and that was the entirety of their greeting, which suited both of them. Clara moved to the small reference section near the back and began browsing with the focused but unhurried attention of someone who is not quite sure what she is looking for but will recognize it when she sees it. She tilted her head slightly to read the spines, her lips moving just barely, as people sometimes do when reading to themselves, and occasionally she would pull a volume out, hold it for a moment to feel its weight and sense its quality, and then either tuck it under her arm or replace it gently in its slot. She had done this for years, this particular physical way of assessing a book before deciding on it, and she had once tried to explain it to an apprentice she had taken on for a season, saying that a book tells you a great deal about itself in the first moment you hold it, before you've even opened it. The weight of it, the flexibility of the spine, the quality of the binding. It is not just what is inside. The outside has a conversation with your hands whether you invite it to or not. Her apprentice had nodded thoughtfully, and she had left it at that. In the armchair by the window, Fred turned a page without looking up. The rain had eased slightly, falling now as a very fine drizzle that caught the gray light and turned the window glass into something like textured silver. A pigeon had settled on the ledge outside, its feathers puffed out with magnificent indifference, and it sat there in the rain as though it had made a decision it was entirely at peace with. Edith noticed it and felt the small particular pleasure she always felt when animals chose to shelter near the shop. She had over the years kept a small mental record of these visitors. A fox that had passed through the alley 3 winters ago and paused to look through the window for a long, unhurried moment. A cat of undetermined ownership that had spent an entire Tuesday afternoon on the doorstep. Various birds on the ledge outside, mostly pigeons, but occasionally something more unusual. She did not write any of this down. It was simply something she carried with her, quietly, the way you carry small, good things. At 11:15, Clara brought 3 books to the desk. 2 volumes on historical paper-making techniques and a slim collection of botanical illustrations from the early 1900s that she had found tucked horizontally on a high shelf and could not resist. She and Edith spoke softly about the botanical one for a few minutes. Edith had bought it at an estate sale years ago and had always half intended to read it herself, but somehow the right moment had never come. And Clara said she thought it might inspire a project she had been turning over in her mind for some time now, involving hand-marbled end papers in colors taken from old flower illustrations. Edith said that sounded lovely, and meant it. Clara paid, tucked the books carefully into her canvas bag, and said she might come back for tea later in the afternoon if the rain kept on. Edith said she'd leave the kettle ready. The door gave its soft chime, and Clara was gone, back into the gray, gentle street. The shop settled again. Fred had finished his chapter and was sitting with the book resting in his lap, looking out the rain-blurred window at nothing in particular. Edith had refilled her tea and was back with her old letters. The pigeon on the ledge had been replaced by 2 pigeons, both equally puffed and equally at peace. This is what the middle of a rainy day looks like in a shop like this. Not empty, exactly, full in its own way, full of the quiet weight of books and the soft sounds of rain and the unhurried presence of people who have nowhere better to be, full of the particular kind of time that happens when the weather slows the world down and the world accepts it. You can just rest here in the warmth of it. There is nothing pressing, nothing to figure out. Let your body be heavy against whatever is holding you. Let the sounds of the story settle around you like the smell of old paper and cedar, comfortable and familiar. A little past noon, Edith closed up for a brief lunch, a practice she had maintained faithfully over the years, despite occasional suggestions from various well-meaning people that she might do better to stay open through the middle of the day. She had considered the matter and decided against it. The midday break was not purely practical. It was something the shop needed. A rest, a pause, a chance to simply be itself without anyone moving through it. She ate at her small table in the back room, looking out at the fern in the alley. The fern was glistening with rain, its fronds dark and heavy with water. And she ate her sandwich slowly and watched it the way you might watch a small, uncomplicated thing that is simply being exactly what it is. Fred had long since taken his leave, saying as he replaced the blue-jacketed book on the center table, he had decided, after some consideration, not to buy it today, though he thought he might come back for it on Saturday. That the rain was very fine, wasn't it? Edith had agreed that it was. He had buttoned his coat to the collar and stepped out, and the door had given its 2-note chime, and he had crossed the street in his unhurried way and disappeared around the corner. After her lunch, Edith made a fresh pot of tea and allowed herself 20 minutes of doing nothing at all, which she had practiced long enough to be quite good at. She sat in the back room, her hands loosely folded, her eyes half closed, listening to the rain on the roof. It had varied throughout the day. This rain, now heavier, now barely there, now somewhere between. She had followed its changes without thinking about them, the way you follow the shifting light in a room without noting it consciously. There was something about rain on a roof. She had thought about it sometimes, the strange comfort of it, the way it suggested safety without saying so, something about the contrast of being dry and still while water moved over everything just above your head. She had felt it since she was very small, the particular peace of being inside during rain, and she supposed she had never entirely grown out of it, nor had any real desire to. When her 20 minutes were up, she knew this not from a clock, but from some interior sense she had developed over years of doing the same thing. She put her cup in the small sink, smoothed the blue checked cloth on the table, and went back into the shop. The afternoon passed in its own rhythm. A mother came in with a boy of about 8 who went immediately to the children's section and sat cross-legged on the floor among the picture books with the settled authority of someone who has found exactly where he belongs. His mother browsed the fiction section while keeping half an ear open in his direction, though he gave her no cause for concern. He was entirely absorbed, turning pages with great deliberateness, occasionally holding a book up to look at an illustration more closely, his face very serious. The boy had a name. Edith heard his mother use it once, softly calling him George when it was time to go. And he had, in the half hour he spent on the floor of the children's section, worked his way through 4 picture books entirely, and a 5th to the halfway point, before his mother gently suggested they ought to head back before the rain picked up again. George stood up with visible reluctance, placed all 5 books with careful precision back in their approximate positions on the lower shelf, and then turned to his mother and asked with great composure whether they could come back on Saturday. She said they could, and his face arranged itself into a quiet satisfaction. Edith gave him a small bookmark as they were leaving. She kept a jar of them on the front desk, simple ones in soft colors with no writing on them, that she gave to children who visited, and he took it very solemnly as one accepts a significant gift. The door chimed. They were gone. The afternoon deepened. The rain shifted again, quieter now, more of a steady, soft presence than a specific sound. The light outside had taken on the particular pale quality of a wet, late afternoon, a kind of silver that had no single source, but seemed to come from everywhere at once. Edith moved through the shop slowly, reshelving a few books that customers had left on the center table, adjusting a display near the front window, pausing here and there simply to stand in a particular spot and feel the quality of the silence. She had long since stopped wondering whether this was a strange way to spend a life. Or rather, she had wondered it once, years ago, and the answer had been simple enough that she had not needed to return to it. She was in the right place. She did the right thing. Some lives are uncomplicated in this way, and she had learned to receive that simplicity as the gift it was, without looking for more complexity behind it. There is something in that thought worth sitting with, gently. Not everything needs to be resolved or pushed further. Some things are simply good as they are. Some days are simply quiet and complete. Let that be enough for right now. Let the rain keep falling softly somewhere nearby. Let the world outside be doing whatever it does, and let it do it without you for a little while longer. Around 3 in the afternoon, true to her word, Clara came back. She came in out of the rain, shaking her coat a little, her hair slightly more disheveled than it had been in the morning. She had clearly been working. Edith could tell by the faint trace of paste on the side of her left hand, which was an occupational constant, and she settled at the small table near the window that Edith kept with 2 chairs specifically for this kind of afternoon visit. Edith made tea without being asked, and Clara sat back in her chair and looked around the shop with the particular contentment of someone returning to a place that feels like a rest. They talked for a little while about the botanical book and what Clara might do with it, about a commission Clara had taken on, an old family Bible, badly water damaged, that needed its pages carefully separated and dried and its binding replaced. About nothing in particular, really. The way people talk when there is no agenda and the afternoon is slow, and the rain provides a gentle backing sound to everything. Clara told Edith about a technique she had been experimenting with for marbling paper using oil paints floated on water. She described the way the colors moved on the surface when you breathed gently across them, and how no two sheets ever came out the same, which was part of the point. She described the particular greens and blues she had been working with recently, which together made something that looked, she said, like shallow water over pale stone, and she had found she could not stop making it. Edith said it sounded like the sea. Clara considered that for a moment and said, yes, actually, a very quiet sea. Outside the window, the rain fell through the gray afternoon, and the street glistened, and people passed occasionally with umbrellas or turned-up collars, moving quickly between one warm place and another. And inside the shop, everything was still and unhurried and good. There is something you might find yourself noticing now, if you are still with me. A kind of warmth that has nothing to do with temperature exactly. The warmth of being somewhere that has been cared for. A shop that has been tended for 30 years carries something of all those 30 years in its walls. All the hours of quiet, all the books read, all the small conversations, all the rain on the windows. A place like that has a quality to it that is different from a new place. It is settled. It has found its weight. You might know a place like that yourself. Maybe it is a room in a house you grew up in, or a corner of somewhere you used to go that felt safe and familiar. Maybe it is just a quality, a feeling, the particular ease of somewhere you belong without having to explain yourself. Whatever it is for you, it is exactly that feeling this shop holds, in its cedar-smelling quiet, in its creaking floors, in the soft amber light falling across the spines of its books. You can carry that feeling right now, wherever you are. You don't need to be anywhere particular to feel it. It is already here. Let your body soften a little more. There's no place you need to be. The story will keep going softly, and all you need to do is nothing at all. Clara left as the afternoon was growing late, carrying her full canvas bag and saying she would see Edith before the end of the week. Probably, or next week at the latest. And Edith said that was fine. There was no rush. And Clara smiled, and the door gave its 2-note chime, and she went back out into the rain, which had by now become very fine again, barely more than a cool, damp breath against the face. The shop fell quiet. In the last hour before closing, Edith did what she always did. She moved through every section of the shop in a slow, unhurried circuit, not tidying so much as checking in, the way you might walk through a house you love before going to bed, not because anything needs doing, but because you want to pass through each room, feel the quality of the evening in each corner. Make sure everything is where it should be. She ran her fingers along the history shelves. She straightened the small globe on the map table that had a tendency to drift slightly on its stand. She adjusted the fold of a dust jacket on the center table. She checked the children's section and found that George, in his careful reshelving, had placed one of the picture books upside down, which made her smile, and she said it right. She turned off the reading lamp near the poetry section and stood for a moment as the corner went softer and darker. The rain outside was almost nothing now, a suggestion of rain. The street outside was a deep, wet gray, reflecting the warm light of the cafe across the way. And in the window of that cafe, she could see the usual shapes of people sitting with their evening things. And it all looked very peaceful from here, through the water-blurred glass. She thought, as she sometimes did at this hour, of Arthur Morrow, who had given her this shop and this life and this particular way of ending each day. She hoped, in a quiet way that asked nothing of anyone, that wherever he was, he knew it had been well kept. She went to the back room and washed her mug and the 2 cups from the afternoon tea. She put on her coat, which was a warm wool one in a dark charcoal gray. She picked up her bag. She turned off the last light. For a moment, she stood in the doorway between the back room and the darkened shop, and let her eyes adjust, and looked out at the shapes of the shelves in the near darkness. The rows and rows of books, their spines barely visible, their quiet presence filling the room in a way that was, she had always felt, something close to breathing. She said, very softly, the way you might say goodnight to something you love, "Good night then." And she stepped out and locked the door behind her. The brass bell above the door gave, from the outside, a very small sound, not its full 2-note chime, but just the briefest touch, a barely there ring, like a note played softly on the far side of a wall. And then the street was quiet. The shop was dark and still. Outside, the rain had stopped without anyone particularly noticing, the way rain often does, gradually, then suddenly, then gone. The street glistened from what had fallen, the wet pavement holding the soft reflections of the streetlights, the puddles catching the last pale light of the evening sky. The sign above the door, Morrow and Company, Books, was dark now, its hand-painted letters invisible in the night, but the rain had left a few drops caught along the wooden edge of the sign, and in the glow of the streetlight, they sat there, small and still, like a quiet punctuation at the end of a long, easy sentence. Inside the shop, the books waited in their rows, the way books always wait. Patient, unhurried, entirely comfortable with the dark and the silence. The particular smell of the place, paper and cedar and thyme and faintly, still, lavender from the children's section, had nowhere to go, and so it simply stayed, filling the still air with its presence, warm and familiar. The armchair near the window held the shape, very faintly, of all the hours that had been spent in it. The creaking planks near the history shelves and the window table had gone silent, needing no feet on them to speak. The small reading lamp near the poetry section was off, its corner dark and soft. Outside, a car passed slowly on the wet street, its lights moving across the front of the building without entering it. A moment later, another. Then quiet again. This is the deep quiet of a closed shop at the end of a rainy day. It is a very particular kind of quiet, not empty, not lonely, more like the quiet of something resting, the way a garden rests in the evening after a day of being a garden, the way a fire rests when it has burned down to a low, steady glow. Everything has done what it was supposed to do today, and now it rests. You have done what you were supposed to do today, and now you rest. You don't have to hold anything, not thoughts, not worries, not the shape of the day. Let it all be like the rain that has stopped. It came. It was what it was. And now it is simply gone, leaving everything a little cleaner, a little more still than before. let your breathing slow. Let it be just breathing, in and out and in again, with no effort, with no direction, just the body doing the one thing it always knows how to do. Somewhere nearby, maybe outside your window or at the edge of hearing, there might be a soft sound of wind or rain settling into gutters, or the ordinary nighttime sounds of the world going quietly about its business. Those sounds are not asking anything of you. They are just there, like the rain against the shop window, soft and constant and safe. The shop stands on its quiet street. The books rest in their rows. Edith has gone home to her own evening, to her own house where there is probably another book and another cup of tea, waiting on a small table beside a chair. And she will read for a little while and then let herself sleep as easily as someone who has spent a day well and has nothing unfinished to keep them awake. Fred has walked home through the damp streets, his coat collar still up, his hands in his pockets, his mind quiet and pleasantly unoccupied, and he has gone inside to his own warm place and is probably, by now, sitting with that blue-jacketed book that he borrowed from a shelf in his own house. He has many, or perhaps simply watching the last gray light fade out of the sky, which he has always found satisfying. Clara is back in her studio, or perhaps she has finished for the day, her workbench cleared of its paste and paper, the light low, the smell of her studio a different kind of good smell, linen and paste and the faint sharpness of dye. And she is turning over in her mind the colors of shallow water over pale stone, and she will think about them softly as she falls asleep, and in the morning she will go back to the marbling tray and make something new. And little George will have told someone about the books he read today, or perhaps he will have kept it to himself. Children often do that with things that matter to them, hold them quietly for a while before sharing. And he will have the bookmark Edith gave him somewhere safe, and he is thinking about Saturday. All of them are resting now, and you can rest too. There is nothing left to figure out, nothing left to tend to or arrange. The shop is dark and safe and still. The rain has stopped. The street is quiet. The night has settled over everything like a soft cloth over furniture, gently covering the shapes of the day. Let the warmth of wherever you are hold you now. Let your thoughts, if there are any left, be very small and quiet. Let them drift the way the last few drops fall from a leaf after rain, not urgently, not with direction, just falling softly into nothing. The smell of old books, the sound of a brass bell, very faint, the glow of a reading lamp being turned off, in a room growing soft and dark, the warmth of a cup between both hands, the quiet of two people reading in the same room, the rain on the roof, the fern in the alley, dark and glistening. These things are here with you now, if you want them, very softly, very gently, just small, warm images that ask nothing, give nothing, only drift. Let them drift. Let yourself drift. There is nothing you need to hold on to. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. The shop is closed and the street is quiet, and the night is long and soft, and there is nowhere to go, and nothing to become, and nothing to do except this, exactly this, the slow, sweet falling into rest that has been waiting for you all day. Let it come. It is already here. The street outside is dark. A cat walks along the top of a low wall. its paws silent on the wet stone, its path unhurried and sure. It passes under the lamp and is briefly a small golden shadow. And then it continues around a corner and is gone. The sign above the bookshop door catches no light now. The brass bell is still. And inside, in the comfortable dark, the books breathe slowly. If you're still awake and listening, thank you for spending this quiet time with me. If you'd like more stories like this one, you can leave a soft like, subscribe to the channel, and whisper a word in the comments so I know what kind of story you'd like next. Sleep well.